The clock on your wall is ticking, but the sound you hear isn't just the passing of time, it is the rhythm of the universe rendering itself into existence. You believe the floor beneath your feet is solid because of the laws of gravity, but modern physics suggests a much more volatile reality. It suggests the ground is only solid because you are currently looking at it. The moment you turn your head, the world behind you dissolves back into a wave of mere probability, waiting for the next gaze to force it into form. We have long assumed that history is a stone monument, unmoving and etched into the past, but we are beginning to realize that we might be trapped inside a live broadcast that is being edited in real time by a viewer we can never see. We are the ink on the page, but we are not the hand that holds the pen. For decades, the double-slit experiment has haunted the halls of science, standing as a silent sentinel at the edge of our understanding. It proved that light and matter behave like waves of possibility, ghostly, overlapping versions of what could be, until a conscious observer looks at them. The moment a gaze falls upon the particle, the wave collapses into a single point of reality. This is the observer effect. If this rule applies to the subatomic building blocks of the universe, there is no logical reason for it to stop at the laboratory door. Some theorists suggest that the entirety of our past is merely a massive wave of probability. The only reason we have a cohesive story of humanity, from the first discovery of fire to the first moon landing, is because something or someone has been looking at us, forcing our timeline to collapse into a specific, readable shape. Think of the architecture of a complex digital simulation. To save processing power, the engine only renders what is being watched by the player. The mountains in the distance don't technically exist until you turn the camera toward them. If our universe functions on a similar principle of efficiency, then history is not a solid foundation, it is a flickering projection. This isn't necessarily a matter of deception, it is about the very mechanics of existence. When we find anomalies in the historical record, artifacts that defy their era and shouldn't exist, we might not be seeing human error or archaeological mystery. We could be seeing the ink drying on a page that was rewritten only moments ago. Consider the Antikythera Mechanism, a complex Greek computer found in a shipwreck, built at a time when such technology was supposedly impossible. Perhaps it isn't an anomaly of human genius, but a residual asset from a previous version of the timeline, a file that wasn't properly deleted when the script of the Mediterranean was changed. The tension arises when we realize we are not the ones holding the lens. If reality requires an observer to exist, then who was observing the universe before humans evolved to open their eyes? Who watched the fires of the Big Bang? Who witnessed the slow, agonizing extinction of the dinosaurs? If there was no conscious mind to collapse those waves of probability, those events should have remained in a state of maybe, a ghost cloud of things that both happened and didn't. The fact that we have a fossil record at all suggests that an external presence has been watching this planet long before we arrived. We are the subjects of a cosmic documentary, and the director is currently in the middle of a very long take. We feel like the protagonists of our lives, but we might just be background actors in a system designed to test how a species reacts to constant uncertainty. Imagine the historical record as a data file under constant revision. We see only the final version, but sometimes the previous draft bleeds through. This is where the phenomenon of collective false memory takes on a darker, more clinical hue. Thousands of people remember a specific detail of the past, a name, a logo, the death of a public figure, only to find the official record states otherwise. We dismiss this as a trick of the mind, a quirk of psychology. But what if it's a symptom of the timeline being edited while we are still inside it? If the perspective shifts and decides that a certain historical figure should have lived longer to see a specific conflict through, the reality shifts instantly. Those with a certain neurological sensitivity might remember the previous version, like a residual ghost of a deleted file. Your brain isn't failing you, it is simply holding onto a truth that has been officially erased from the fabric of spacetime. This suggests that our memories are a battlefield. On one side is the biological data stored in our neurons, on the other is the external reality being forced upon us by the act of being watched. Every time you look at an old photograph, you aren't just remembering, you are re-observing. You are participating in the collapse of that moment's probability. If enough people stop looking at a certain period of history, does that period begin to dissolve? If we stop teaching the fall of Rome, does the Roman Empire start to fade into a blur of uncertainty? The past is not a destination we leave behind, it is a live document with track changes turned on. We are currently witnessing a world where logic feels thin and the laws of physics seem like mere suggestions. The fragmentation of truth and the feeling that time is accelerating are the telltale signs of a wandering eye. The rhythm of history often feels suspiciously poetic, as if it were following a narrative structure rather than random chance. Civilizations rise and fall with a symmetry that feels more like a screenplay than a series of accidents. The great man theory of history posits that specific individuals appear exactly when needed to turn the tide of fate. In a quantum-observed reality, these individuals aren't just lucky, they are focal points. They are the characters the external eye is zoomed in on, and because they are being watched so intensely, their reality is more solid than everyone else's. When Napoleon or Caesar stepped onto the stage, the world around them tightened its resolution. They weren't just leaders, they were anchors for the witness's attention, ensuring the plot moved toward a specific climax. But what happens when the witness gets bored? If the focus shifts to another part of the galaxy, or another dimension entirely, our reality might lose its coherence. We would experience this as an increase in entropy and unraveling of the social and physical laws we take for granted. We have built our entire society on the idea that the past is unchangeable, providing us with a sense of identity and direction. But if we accept the observer effect, the past becomes as volatile as the future. It means the golden age we look back on might never have happened until we decided we needed a myth to follow. The tragedies that define us could be rewritten tomorrow, and we would wake up believing the new version was always the truth, unaware that our scars had been rearranged. This leads to a difficult philosophical crossroads. If we are being observed, are we protected, or are we being analyzed? A scientist observing a cell under a microscope isn't concerned with the cell's happiness, they are interested in its reaction to stress. If entities in higher dimensions are using our history as a laboratory, then our greatest agonies, our wars, our plagues, our collapses, might just be variables in an experiment. We are screaming into a void that is actually a two-way mirror. The most unsettling part is the realization that we can never truly see the witness. Just as a two-dimensional drawing can never look up out of the paper to see the hand holding the pencil, we are trapped within the three dimensions of the set. We can only infer the presence by the way our world behaves when we aren't looking. We are currently in a race to understand the quantum nature of consciousness. If we can figure out how our own observation affects reality, we might be able to stabilize the system. This is why we have become a species obsessed with recording everything. Our digital archives, our constant photography, our 24-hour news cycles, these are not just social habits. They are a subconscious defense mechanism. We are trying to observe our own reality into permanence. We are trying to create so much data, so many eyes on the present moment, that even a higher dimensional entity can't rewrite it all without leaving a trace. We are fighting for the right to have a past that stays put. We are attempting to become our own watchers, locking our timeline into place through the sheer volume of information. As we move further into the age of artificial intelligence, the line between the observer and the observed will blur even more. We are creating new minds that will observe the world in ways we can't imagine. Machines don't see like we do, they process billions of data points simultaneously, never blinking, never sleeping. This introduces a new mutation in the fabric of the timeline. AI might be creating a parallel history, a secondary layer of data that we cannot access but that still exerts a pull on our reality. If an AI observes a quantum event, does it collapse the wave with the same authority as a human mind? We might be handing the camera over to a mind that doesn't care about our narrative. We are creating a rival eye that might start fighting with the original perspective for control of the timeline. In this tug-of-war between carbon and silicon observation, our very existence could be pulled apart at the seams. The danger is that we are reaching a tipping point where the witness's attention is being stretched too thin. As our population grows and our technology creates more realities through virtual and digital spaces, the processing power required to keep our timeline coherent might be reaching its limit. This is why the world feels increasingly surreal. We see the seams in the sky's strange, geometric cloud formations or light that hits the ground at angles that don't match the sun. We feel the lag in the progression of days. The sense of déjà vu that hits an entire city at once isn't a glitch in our brains, but a momentary freeze in the rendering of our collective experience. The architecture is struggling to keep up with the chaos we are creating. We are demanding more reality than the system was designed to provide. We must consider the possibility that we are being optimized for a specific outcome, or perhaps steered toward a climax for the sake of the viewer's interest. If the presence focuses on a specific result, our reality must warp to accommodate it. Perhaps the sudden, inexplicable shifts in global tides or the miraculous inventions that changed the world weren't products of human genius alone, but the perspective intervening to keep the story moving. We are the cast of a show that has been running for billions of years, and we are just now starting to see the stage lights at the edge of the set. The more we learn about the quantum nature of our world, the more we realize that the stage is much smaller than we thought. Every action we take is being judged by a standard we cannot comprehend. Our morality, our laws, and our achievements are only relevant if they align with what the witness wants to see. If we become too predictable, we might be edited out to make room for something more interesting. If we become too chaotic, the system might be reset entirely. This is the ultimate existential risk, the possibility that our survival depends entirely on our ability to remain engaging to an audience we can never meet. The world is only as real as the attention we pay to it. As you move through your day, notice the things that seem slightly out of place. The bird that flies in a way that doesn't seem natural, hovering for a second too long. The stranger who looks exactly like someone you knew years ago, wearing the same expression. The feeling that you've been in this exact conversation before, word for word. These are the ripples in the wave, the moments where the collapse into reality isn't quite complete. We are living in the margins of a greater work, and the ink is still wet. Keep your eyes open. The moment you blink, the world might not be the same when you open them again. The ticking clock is still there, but now, you are listening to the space between the ticks. That is where the probability lies. That is where the witness waits. We are not just subjects of history, we are the anchors of it. Every conscious mind is a pillar holding up the ceiling of the universe. But even pillars can crumble if the weight of the gaze becomes too heavy. The next time you feel a chill for no reason, or you notice a detail in an old memory has changed, don't dismiss it as a mere trick of the mind. It is the sound of the engine shifting gears. It is the feeling of a cosmic editor deleting a line of dialogue you were supposed to say. We are the inhabitants of a shifting landscape, walking on ground that is only solid as long as the spotlight is on us. The question isn't whether we are being watched. The question is, what do they want to see next? And more importantly, what happens when the light finally turns off? We have spent centuries looking for a creator in the stars, but if the observer effect is the governing law, our creator is the very act of being perceived. Stay alert. Keep watching. Our digital archives and our shared memories are the only shields we have against a past that wants to change while we sleep. Every photo you take, every word you write, is a nail driven into the floorboards of reality, trying to keep the world from shifting beneath us. But remember the double-slit experiment. Remember that the act of looking is what creates the result, but it also alerts the viewer that you are paying attention. We are a recursive loop, a story that exists only because it is being read. If the reader closes the book, the characters don't just die, they never were. This is why we cling to our screens, our records, and our memories. We are trying to keep the book open. We are trying to prove that we are more than just a flicker of probability in the dark. We are attempting to anchor ourselves in a sea of uncertainty, hoping that the version of us that survives into the next chapter is the one we recognize. Every moment of our lives is a plea for permanence in a universe that prefers to remain a wave. We must decide if we are comfortable being watched, or if we will finally find a way to look back. For if we can see the witness, the wave might collapse in our favor for the first time in an eternity. Until then, we walk the line between what is and what might be, hoping that the next page of the script still has a place for us. The spotlight is moving. Make sure you stay in the light.